information is on working with the school rather than working against the school. Of course, you know, to work as a collaborative team, you've got to have both sides buy in, so that would be our goal here, okay? So it's difficult to imagine a more difficult setting for a child with ADHD than a classroom, okay? They must sit still for long periods of time. They need to stay quiet. They need to listen and comprehend continuous lists of instructions. They need to follow multiple directions. They need to sequence them. They need to work independently. They have to, what we call, execute or start working on their own. They need to be productive in the time they're allotted. They need to regulate the behavior and regulate their emotions and be able to appropriately interact with classmates and teachers all at the same time. And we do this to our kids who are challenged in all of these areas 5 days a week. Okay, so we're putting them in really difficult situations, but we obviously have no choice, right? So the three general and most common areas of concern in the classroom for these kids are the ADHD symptoms on their learning and productivity, their impact in interaction with peers and adults, and are they able to sit quietly, do their work, and not be disruptive, okay? So I talked about this yesterday, but again, it's a really important point. So research indicates that interventions that target academic impairments and behavior should be targeted first, as they frequently, if we target the academic impairments and first, the behavior increases. So if as a school, you know, or teachers, they focus on the behavior, and that's where we have concerns where these kids are labeled in the behavior category. We know if the whole focus is behavior intervention, what is the kid doing? Are they on task? Are they getting their work done? Are they not disrupting other kids? Rarely does their behavior improve. And their academics will definitely not improve. If we focus on what strategies can we put in place to work with their impairments, their academics improves, but surprisingly, well, not surprisingly to us, but surprisingly to a lot of people, the behavior improves because you're working on the impairments. You're putting in accommodations, strategies, and the child is not as frustrated. If you are asking them to do the same work as the other kids, be able to work the same amount of time, pay attention the same amount of time, and do all of these things like the other kids, you're really putting a load on their executive functioning and their window of attention, okay? That is when they're going to start behaving. So first steps in developing sort of a plan. So first, list your concerns from your perspective, I would say, okay? So what is your child struggling in, right? What are they good at? What are they functioning well at? A lot of times as parents, we focus on the bad, the negative, instead of good. Physicians, sometimes the first thing they'll ask a parent when they come in to see them is, tell me the good things about your child. Parents will very often go, because they're not focused on the good things right now. They've come to see this doctor about everything that's going wrong. But we have to keep it in perspective. All kids have got good qualities as well, and things they're good at, right? So develop this list from your perspective. What are your priorities here? What are the things that need to be addressed first? Make an appointment, go and meet the teacher, and listen to the teacher's concerns. So from the teacher's perspective, what do they see as their priority? How do they see your child struggling, right? Sometimes as parents it's very difficult to not be defensive about what you're hearing, but hear the teacher out, because you want to hear from their perspective what they're seeing in a classroom. If your child's old enough, and you know what, they can frequently do this quite young, chat with your child about their perspective. How did they see it? What do they think is going on? A lot of times with kids with ADHD, what you'll get is it's everybody else's problem. If people were just different and didn't ask them to do these things or didn't provoke them, everything would be fine. They have absolutely no problem. That's when we are dealing with a lack of insight with kids with ADHD, so don't be surprised. But some kids, if you get beyond that, you can learn a lot from them about where are they struggling, where are they having a hard time, and some key questions can be quite beneficial. I'll show you a chart in a minute that'll help you with that. So realize that after you do this, all three of you may have a different viewpoint as to where this child is struggling the most. Might be a lack of knowledge and education. Obviously, you know, your child's not going to have that much insight. You might find, especially after this course, you have more insight on where your child's impairments are getting in the way. The teacher may be more focused on where the child's disruptive behavior is a problem. Or, you know, some teachers have been educated on this. They may have a lot of insight in this. So then it's a matter of getting on the same page, right? And then trying to figure out those impairments and triggers again. And if you can, observing your child in the classroom environment, if you can do it where you're sort of not disruptive to your child in class, can be very helpful, because you have one way of relating to your child and you see them in a home environment. A lot of times you're working with them on schoolwork on a one-to-one basis. It can be very, very different in a classroom of 30 kids. You might be surprised in how your child is functioning in that classroom, or you may not be, but sometimes if you can set it up, it's helpful. So there's a handout called School Observation List. 1 page, 2 sides. It basically lists things that you need to think about in a school. If you're going in to observe in that school, a lot of parents will volunteer, be in the school off and on. And you know, there are different things to think about, look at. So this is broken down into observations of the child, observations of the classroom, observations of other kids in the class or school, and observation of the school in general. Okay, so when you're in the classroom, obviously, you know, you're observing your child. Are they daydreaming? Are they hyperactive? Are they able to follow the teacher's instructions? Do they know what to do when it comes down to work time? Are they able to initiate a task? Are they productive? Are they highly distractible? Do they get along with their peers? Can they work in a group? All these kind of things you need to look at. And again, this is a good tool to look at every once in a while to ask yourself these questions. So look at the classroom. How is it set up? Is it well organized? Are there a lot of visual reminders? Are there a lot of cues? Is it too busy? Are there a lot of distractions, right? Is it one of these open concept classrooms where you're hearing noise from several classrooms? Is your child sat beside the pencil sharpener and kids are going up to the pencil sharpener all day long? All of those kind of things. Look at the classroom, and then look at what the teacher is doing. Does the teacher chunk the work? Do they list the instructions 1 or 2 at a time? Again, this will give you a lot of insight what's going on. Also, watch the other students. You know, is your child sitting beside another student who will interrupt them because that child has a problem with being disruptive or just distracted? Is there a lot of movement of chairs? This can be really difficult with kids with ADHD. If there's a lot of noise, kids with ADHD have filtering problems. They pick up everything, all the noises that are coming at them at the same level. So they are unable to shut out the kid's squeaky chair beside them, kids moving chairs, noise of somebody walking down the hall, the bird tweeting outside the window, whatever. They can't shut that out to be able to focus on the teacher. So look at that. And then also look at the school in general. Does the school have a positive environment? Is it accepting for kids with different, ways of learning, different impairments, all of these kind of stuff? What is the knowledge of the principal and the staff in general about ADHD? Do they get it? Or might some sharing of information and volunteering to set up a presentation for them, that kind of stuff, be helpful? Is there a lot of teasing and bullying going on? And what are the school's policies on this? And it makes a huge difference. The one largest factor we know about a kid's experience of ADHD is whether their teacher and principal get ADHD. Okay, so you need to evaluate that. Okay, so things to remember. You have to be prepared to be your child's advocate all through their school, at least until post-secondary, and then a lot of times even in post-secondary, although colleges and universities usually don't like parents involved, but you may have to be somewhat involved. Be aware that educators are most likely not educated about ADHD. And they may need some education material. Again, it's going to depend on the educator, the environment of the school, whether they're open to this or not. So it's best to use consistent strategies between home and school. The more these things can be set up as a team, the more you can share this with the school to say, you know what, when we do this with our child, we have great consequences. Things work. We have less meltdowns. They're able to get their work done. Maybe this is something, that you can implement in the classroom. Again, this consistency is also really good for these kids. Try to develop a plan, a shared plan between school and home. So communication between school and home is important. An agenda is frequently sent home, set out with schools, but here's the thing with agendas. If all there is an agenda are the notes coming home from the teachers, if the only thing in there is going to be negative in a list of what the child has done, don't be surprised that it doesn't come home. These kids aren't stupid. Are they really going to bring home all this negative feedback to share with the parents? There's got to be positive, and parents are just, we're human beings. We're just going to shut down if we constantly just get negative. And if they're negative about small things, the school should be dealing with on a daily basis. You're not at school. You're not going to be able to do something, if your child is wiggling in their seat or disruptive. I mean, that should be a school, message to the school is you need to put an accommodation. Are they having movement breaks? So there's tons of easy ways to do all of this stuff. But when they come to you with these messages of, well, they did this and they did that and they didn't, that should be your opening of the discussion of, okay, we need to talk about this. What can you implement? Because I cannot stop this when I'm at home and my child's at school, and this is how we handle it at home. So daily report cards are a more formal way. Sometimes they're set up, if the child gets 3 out of 4 check marks on something, they get a reward at home because they've done well at school. Again, it depends on your child, your school, all of that kind of stuff. But if this stuff is going to be negative constantly, you don't want to go there. Phone calls or emails, sometimes schools communicate with parents. I mean, you want to have an open line of communication. If you can get it done over email, the better. There is a written follow trail of communication you then have with email that you don't have with phone calls. So if it comes to advocacy and the advocacy gets contentious, having a written email trail, all the better. Anything that happens, so if your child is suspended, they have to have a written report on what happened, why, all this kind of things. The number of times schools suspend kids and don't have any type of written documentation is quite surprising, right? There has to be that, because the problem is, you know, one, if you're going to contest the suspension, or if these things happen frequently, you're not going to have a way to track it. I suggest parents always have a binder where you keep all your reports, psychologist, teacher, if you've got an audiologist report, whatever you've got, you keep them in the binder. You obviously make copies, any of their IEPs, their IPRC, whatever you've got is in there, but you also keep communication from the school in there. If the school phones you and, you know, the principal wants to have a chat, say, you know, I'm really happy to discuss this with you. Can you follow it up on an email? I mean, you can use your own, just basically say, you know, this is emotional for me. Sometimes I forget what we've talked about. If you're asking me to do things, or, you know, I've got ADHD myself, it would be really helpful. You don't have to tell them. I mean, all those reasons are valid and good. You also don't have to share with them. You want, you know, a written record of all your conversations, you know, for your advocacy work, or if there's issues at the end. Yes, question?
I was just going to say, if they're not doing that, you can also send them an email. So I
yes, exactly.
Please let me know if this is not correct. Oh, there's your
Yeah, exactly. So you can get, and you know, again, this is looking at this as a business. So we frequently do this in business, right? When we have a conference call, it's followed up by an email to say, my understanding, you know, of our meeting was this, this, and this, and you know, the expectation, or my expectation from this meeting is that this will be implemented in 2 weeks. You know, I am just suggesting a follow-up meeting by this time. I am looking forward to hearing from you by this and this. So then you've got a legit reason. If you don't hear back, you know, they've got it. So some type of paper trail. I mean, obviously saying, you know, please reply that you received and agree to this, you know, email or my outline, again, is good. So no matter where it comes from, there has to be some mutual consensus that this is what was discussed and this is what was agreed upon. Yes, a comment?
I was going to say that when I started to encounter problems at school, as I was new to this country, because in my country, school and teachers have power.
Yes.
But here, I had to go to a lawyer to ask what are my rights. He said, as long as you're a parent, you have all the rights. When I got this empowerment, and he is the one who told me you should write everything on emails.
Yes.
It's incredible how things started to speed up.
Yes.
And especially if I used, for example, bullying as words, etc., because they were happening, it started to roll incredibly.
Yes. So the school understands that they have certain responsibilities. Students have certain rights. There's the Education Act, right? And they understand when things start to get documented. And the other thing is they understand when a parent has this knowledge about their rights and the process, that they become much more aware of they could be challenged on this kind of stuff. So you're being knowledgeable about the stuff and how to advocate and what the system is probably the strongest thing you can do to advocate, because they will pick up very quickly if you know what the system is and what your rights are and what your child's rights are, okay? So again, communication, setting up formal meetings, formal follow-up meetings, ensuring that if the school has agreed to something, there's follow-up, it's implemented. Don't just expect that what's been discussed is actually going to go forward. You have to do your work to follow up. And remember when I said parents have to be the case manager? Again, this is your role as an advocate in managing this all for your child. So I don't think we're going to do, we've done a lot of these kind of exercises before. External reminders, you know, and rewards in a school setting. Everything we talked about that you can do at home with external reward systems can also be done at school. But they have to be done well. I'll tell you a really quick story. Young teacher I know who, phenomenal teacher, who worked in, was a teacher of a behavioral class. So we're talking, you know, 4, 5, 6 boys, grades 7 and 8, small behavioral class. There was a teacher, child and youth worker, and an EA. So you know these kids are fairly heavy duty needs kids, right? So they have a system of rewards set up. If the kids earn enough points within that month of their birthday, they are allowed to bring in cupcakes and have a small birthday party as a reward. So one of the kids was able to do this. It was lunchtime, had got all his rewards, had his baked cupcakes there. But of course this kid was totally excited, right? So sitting in a seat beside this child on the wall was a picture. Whenever this child got excited, he would touch, again, we're looking at some of these stress-relieving OCD tendencies, would touch the edge of the picture and it would swing. Lunchtime, teacher's not in the room to remind him, you know, not to do this, just a rotating teacher. And he was doing this more and more, and I guess over time the nail had loosened. Picture falls down, glass smashes. The rotating lunchroom teacher comes in, that's it, down to the principal's office. That child was suspended for destruction of school property. So my question to the teacher was, what do you think you just taught this child? The knee-jerk comment, you know, was, and it would normally be, well, you know, that you can't destroy school property, you know, without a consequence. I said, no, actually what you taught this child is no matter how hard they work and how much effort they put in, their neurodevelopmental disorder, and they wouldn't call it that, is going to shoot them in the foot anyway, so why bother? Right? Really. And I mean, the response was these kids, you know, don't come to class, they're not motivated. And I said, why should they be? You know, you're basically not understanding their underlying power. Why nobody ever took that picture off the wall beyond me? Like, really simple thing to do, right? Why this kid wasn't given a stress toy? Something else to manipulate when he was feeling excited, stressed, whatever. Again, really simple things to put in place. And this is a behavior class with a teacher, an EA, and a child and youth worker in there, right? So again, the thing is that with this lack of knowledge, people in these situations and roles had the best intentions towards this child. They thought they were actually doing good and teaching this child something, right? Because again, they're taught in this behavior mod and consequences and all this type of stuff. They don't understand the underlying impairments and what would drive a child to do this. It's basically stop that, right? So again, it's that knowledge, you know, that leads to the best outcomes for these kids. So putting in all these kind of reward systems, great, but they have to be done correctly. Daily report cards, again, you know, yes, you know, we target 1 to 3 things. Again, reward system, daily report card is it just goes back and forth to home, so it informs the parents how the child did. Benefits, to this sometimes. There can also be problems with this as well. I mean, as a kid, as an adult, as a person, would you want somebody reporting on you every day and then you having to take it home to your spouse and say, I was a good kid today, right? You know, so we have to kind of question some of these things. Homework issues. Homework, huge difficulty for kids with ADHD, huge problem for parents. Excuse me, hugely stressful to family life, can be something that causes great difficulty between home and school. So it's something that we have to think about. So these kids forget to write down the assignment or write it down incorrectly, forget to bring home appropriate materials, they overestimate time required, they don't know where to begin, they're overwhelmed, they procrastinate. So all this stuff we've talked about. Very often homework is boring. It's repetitive. It's doing stuff they've already learned, and that's the point of homework. It's supposed to be practice to reinforce the concept, right? So these kids have a much harder time of it. So, you know, there are accommodations we can put in place. You need to have an open, honest discussion with the teacher, the principal, the school, and say, okay, listen, my child's in grade 6. We are doing homework for 3 hours every evening, and it's, it basically sets up this huge issue. You know, it's eroding our relationship. The child's beds have worn off. They can't pay attention. Why are we doing this? What can we do? So, you know, is it necessary for them to do 20 math questions, or can they do 5 questions? There's a reason for homework, and we don't want to shut it down totally. But again, it's negotiation, understanding what's the point of homework and what your child can do, right? Homework buddies, having written assignments, all kinds of strategies that can be put in place around this. And also getting that concept that just because other kids can do 20 questions or expected to write 2 pages, whatever, doesn't mean equal is fair. Kids need different kinds of things, right? So questions to ask when you're in this discussion with the school: is the child capable of doing the homework you're sending home without help, right? If not, then we have to change it, or we have to know what kind of help. Is the homework practicing a skill, and can the amount be decreased? Is homework being done as a routine during specific times and places? That's a question to ask yourself as a parent. Do they have a specific place to do homework? It's quiet, it's uninterrupted, you're doing it on a consistent schedule, same place, same time, all those kind of things. Have their meds worn off? Are you trying to get them to do homework at 8 o'clock at night when their meds aren't working? You're going to be spinning your wheels and driving yourself and your kid crazy. So you have to change your schedule for this kind of stuff, right? Are you the best person to be working with your kid? Do you maybe need to get a tutor? Teacher's role, the teachers have to get this as well. You know, different kids have different needs around homework. What is the point of homework? They need to challenge themselves around this. They also need to put in a strategy where they actually review or collect the homework. They're not saying to the class, okay, throw your homework on my desk as you go out the door. The kid with ADHD who may have struggled for 2 hours the night before to get that homework done will be excited, run out the door and forget to put the homework on the desk, and the teacher will give them a 0 because they didn't hand it in. Teachers have to be more proactive. You can get they can also have a buddy in class. The kid who sits beside them who's really good at this, he'll poke them and he'll say, get your homework on the desk, right? There's lots of strategies to put in place that the teacher doesn't have to be there every minute. But again, it's that proactive, putting them in place at the beginning of the day. So parents' role in homework. Sometimes what works well is putting in place those external rewards around the homework. And you know, putting in those strategies, 10 minutes on, 2, 3 minutes off. You know, depends. Some kids can do half an hour work and need 5-minute breaks. It depends, you know, on your child. Sit down with your child when they start their homework. review what their assignments are, what they want to tackle first, what they can do on their own, what they're going to need help with, all of those kind of things. So get them initiated, starting the work. Sometimes parents say they have to sit beside their child every minute they do homework. Obviously, the goal would be not to have to do that. You may have to increase it. Frequent monitoring, maybe pop back every 5 or 10 minutes and kind of say, oh, are they doing their homework, or do I need to prod them? So be close. Obviously, yeah, the more time you can get them working on their own, the better, and that would be your goal. Timers, we've talked about them. They can help. And again, you know, setting up, if you're able to work for them 15 minutes of this timer and have a break, and if you can do that for an hour, get your homework done, you get a star or reward, okay? Okay, these are some links of videos which are really good, that have teaching strategies or classroom strategies, things, and these are actually presented by teachers who get this. So again, good resource.